Hi. I want to welcome you, but I want to wait until we've got some more attendees. I see that Betty made it. So I just want to say hi, Betty. We've been emailing back and forth a little bit. I think she's one of Rob's friends, but hi, Betty. I'm going to give it just a minute while the webinar fills up, and then I'll start introducing. Look at this. All right. Well, I want to welcome you to our webinar called I Need a Break. And it feels like we all feel that way now. I don't know about you, but all of the ministry people that I'm talking with, it feels like a lot. And so this is so needed. I'm so grateful that this is our topic today. And the panelists that we have so much wisdom and insight for us. I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Annette. I am a consultant with Ministry Architects. And I'm going to introduce our panel. And then I'll give you guys a little bit of like ins and outs housekeeping about how to work with the features of our webinar. And then we're going to dive into some really great conversation. But I would love, let's start with Rob. And Rob, would you introduce yourself, kind of say where you are, a little bit about your ministry? And I would love for each of you today to say kind of where your church is as far as reopening. Are you thinking about it? Are you already there, and where you're at with that? And then we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks, Annette. My name is Rob Dyer. I am a Presbyterian pastor serving in Southern Illinois, very near to St. Louis, Missouri. Go Cardinals. And we have been Zoom worshiping for over a year. And we did for Easter have a drive-in worship services. But we are looking at a May beginning date for in-person inside worship. So we're in the midst of the crazy tornado chaos that is the actual implementation of those glorious plans that we created over the course of the year. And we convinced ourselves that they were complete and wonderful and everything was settled and ready to go. And then we found out reality. So we're in the middle of that fun along the way. And I've been also serving as a ministry architects consultant since 2014, maybe 15. So it's been a few years, but I really enjoy working with doing church-wide work, helping congregations kind of look at the big picture for the whole ministry of their church. And I also really enjoy doing some coaching with pastors as well. So, and I'm glad to be with you all today.
Thank you, Rob. We're so glad you're here. Aqueelah, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Aqueelah Ligonde. I am a Presbyterian pastor in New York. I'm serving at a Presbyterian church called Far Rockaway Presbyterian, and it's in Queens. I live in Long Island, and today is just it's beautiful today. So we have to kind of like capture these days because tomorrow could be 50 degrees and I'll be back in my hoodies. Let's see, what else? I've been with Ministry Architects. March marked year 6. And so for a little while, I've been able to do a lot of good consulting and coaching with some amazing folks. And I'm also a coach with Ministry Incubators, which is a wonderful organization that helps folks who have dreams and ideas and ministries that they want to get off the ground. And we turn your crazy dreams into a blissful reality is kind of what it feels like. So I'm super excited today to be with y'all and to just dig into taking a break and what that means. And hopefully by the time we're finished, you're ready to do it and take a break.
Yeah. Thank you, Aqueelah. Drew, will you give us a quick introduction?
I will. Aqueelah, did you tell us where you are in person, online?
So we are virtual. Thank you, Drew. We are virtual now, but we did a Easter Saturday service live. And like Rob, in May, we're gonna get back to in person, but we have something in New York City that very few congregations have, and that is a couple acres of land. And so we'll meet outside and it'll be no problem to social distance. And we'll start that like the first Sunday in June. So we're kind of coming to it. We're almost there, and they're really excited about being together again. So.
Cool. Well, my name's Drew. I'm a pastor in Northern Virginia. I'm a United Methodist pastor, so one of these things is not like the others. I'm also a Washington Nationals and Washington Wizards fan. We're right outside DC, and I'm happy to be here with you. Our church added back an indoor service for 1 month. So a few weeks before Easter, our first service back inside the church was 1 year to the Sunday since we were exiled from the sanctuary. So right now on Sundays, we've got one online service and one in-person service. We also do one once a month outside service with communion. We've done drive-in stuff. We kind of like baby stepped the whole way. And now we're looking into what's pandemic worship 4.0 and 5.0 going to look like. So it's great to make a plan, execute a plan, and then have to make a new plan immediately. That's kind of the season that we're in, which is another good reason to talk about getting a break.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of people are finding themselves in similar situations. So thank you for kind of sharing your situation. I want to give you guys a little bit of housekeeping before we move forward anymore. You have a chat box if you want to use that. But also we're going to use the Q&A feature. So if you have a question, if we're talking about something and you want to ask a question, use the Q&A feature. And then if someone else if you see a question that you want to ask already in there, you can upvote it. So then we'll know, oh, okay, 6 people want to know the answer to this question. And so we'll do some Q&A at the end and we'll get to your questions. So that's a little bit of housekeeping. And then in the chat box, Sean is going to put some links to things we talk about, contact information and things like that. So that's how you use those 2 things. I love that we're talking about Sabbath. It just feels like coming out of pandemic, we're all a little bit tired or a lot tired. And it's, as Aqueelah said to me earlier, this is not something a nap can take care of. This is a bigger deal than just that. But I wanted to talk for a second about kingdom culture. It's not our Western culture, but the kingdom culture is to have some Sabbath and to have some rest, but it conflicts with our Western culture. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tension. We're going to talk a little bit about some strategies for finding a rhythm where there's sustainable rest, and then some hopes for the future. But I found it interesting. There's a concept in the Italian culture, and it's the phrase dolce far niente, and it means the sweetness of doing nothing. And it really is a piece of the Italian culture. There's a similar one in Norwegian, but I can't say the word, so I'm just going to let that word go. But know that there are cultures that embrace this rest. And so it is possible. But as we're coming out of this pandemic, let's talk about the tension between doing good ministry, meeting needs, and finding the rest we need. So I would love to hear from our panelists some of the things they've addressed along the way.
Well, I think that part of what's been a challenge with this is that there's almost like this thought that coming back from remote worship, returning in-person worship, that somehow that was a break. And so that like, oh, finally we are starting something, as if it's a return from a break. And the reality is that this past year has probably been some of the hardest work that church leaders have been doing throughout their entire ministry. And I think that with all the expectations of like, let's get back, let's get things started, oh, it'll be so good to be back in the building. And the sense that like, yeah, but we just finished a marathon. It's like, I've never run a marathon. That's not going to happen. I'm 50. We're done with ideas like that. All right. But here's the thing. Like, it's like finishing a race. And then when you get across the finish line, someone said, oh, wait a minute. We forgot to tell you. It's a double marathon. Get going. We just did a marathon and we're about to enter a marathon. And we need to think very seriously about what we do in between these marathons. I'd love to tell you that we can like just avoid one of those, right? But whether you like it or not, there's another marathon that's coming.
And you know what, Rob, as you were talking, like I imagine this is not just a marathon, but while we're running the marathon, we're having to recreate the road while we're on the track. So like we're running, we're doing all the things, and then this happens. So we have to take this road, or this tree falls down. Now, do we jump over the tree? Do we, stop doing indoor service? Do we bring Sunday school back? Like, so it's not just we're not just running the marathon, but we're changing the course of the marathon while we're on the actual road. And so there's this constant creating, constant change, constant innovating, constant questions. More, I mean, of course that happened pre-pandemic. It's ministry, right? So there's always going to be all these things. But this year in particular, like all of us, no matter if you had a great streaming life before and you were Zoom master before, this is different. This past year has been very, very different. So I think all of us have had to kind of rethink how we do things and why we do things. And then there's all this question, there's a lot of questions and pressure and expectations while we're running the race. So it's like all these different things going up at the same time.
Yeah, and the tension in the culture is that nobody's gonna give us a chance to recover between marathon 1 or marathon 2. Nobody's gonna. Our culture largely is not going to say, "Great, we've got to vaccinations. Now's the time when we take a break before we do everything else again." But instead, the demand, the go, the rush, the productivity is king. That idol is going to show up and demand everything immediately. So it does take some discipline to actually take your own break and give yourself the chance to recover. And in theological language, the good news is that God actually does want to give you an opportunity to recover. That's like the whole. I mean, it's a commandment. That's the whole idea behind the Sabbath, is that it's connected to the Exodus to say, you are not a slave. You are not your productivity. You are my child, and so I have ordained a day, or even just a concept, or blessed the nature of the body that we need breaks, and that everything will be okay even if you stop doing stuff for a bit.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second about what that rest looks like. We already said it's not a nap. What does it look like?
I think it could look like a lot of different things. So we were preparing for today. We were thinking through just different models of a rest, and realize that some folks will say, well, I'm not the restful kind of person. Like, I'm not going to take a nap. I don't want, I've never met anybody who said they don't want vacation, but what do I do? I don't know how to, you want me to sit back and read a book or something. Folks need something to do while they rest. And so, I've been thinking about that over the past little while. And I think I'm one of those people. Like, it's kind of hard to power down. But if there's something I can do that I feel like maybe will enrich me, without adding another thing to the road, right? And adding another thing to the marathon. So that could look like, I'm going to finish one of these books on next to my bedstand. Almost every pastor and youth pastor, you have that stack of books. And you're like, oh, I'm going to get to those one day. Maybe rest looks like getting to one of those books. Maybe rest looks like, having breakfast with your kids or with your partner. Maybe rest doesn't have to look like a nap. It doesn't have to look like a 2-week vacation to wherever. Maybe it's something that's very practical and very, very close to you that you can do, that'll give you a sense of centering down a bit and centering kind of your refocusing yourself to take the next leg. Rob, I'm going to use that marathon analogy. That's going to be my thing. Like that's pretty perfect. So it could look a lot of different ways.
I would say for folks like Aqueelah and me that have a hard time slowing down or powering down, especially for people that are like working in work that's your calling, that's your vocation. There's part of the work that does give you life. We have to kind of schedule the rest, and So I'm not a consultant with Ministry Architects, but I've had the same Ministry Architects Ministry Architects coach for almost 10 years, Jen DeYoung. And part of what she's taught me is this sustainable ministry idea about a rhythmic week. And I know we'll make sure to mention that later, but it's a tough discipline, but what it means is I kind of have to trick myself and schedule rest as if it were a really important meeting. And if somebody wants that hour of time, I'll say, I'm sorry, I already have a commitment at that time. And even if that commitment is to do nothing or spend time with my family or mow the lawn, for folks that do go, we have to schedule the stop as if it were a go in order to really make it happen.
Yeah, I think that I like the idea of acknowledging that Sabbath is different for everyone, and I'm terrible at breaking. And when I do, I will take the breaks. They just have a wonderful thin layer of guilt, on top of them, and then there's another real thin layer of acknowledged to-do list that sits there as well. And those two layers play with each other and work on your psyche. So you never really take a good solid break. And I'm at a church right now that's extremely generous and kind in their care of their pastor. So I have the month of June off, whole month of June. So I'm getting that. And what's funny is that I have been so wound up about what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? I don't know. I've been so uncomfortable about it for myself, which is such oh, poor Rob, he gets a whole month off. He doesn't know what to do with it. Right. So I'm just going to admit to you that I was literally just talking with my staff today about this. And I realized I've been so preoccupied with my own difficulty in breaking and pausing for any significant amount of time that I haven't really been talking with them about their breaking and their pausing. And I probably am modeling some pretty bad attitudes and behavior. And I have a hardworking, amazing staff. So they're kind of, they're all in to run a double marathon. But I think it's important to talk with one another. Maybe if you're seeking that break for yourself, or if you're a head of staff and you have other people that you work with, trying to give them space to define Sabbath for themselves. And maybe that other person on your staff just cannot take a whole week off. And you can give them some nice speeches and tell them about the latest thing you read about how it's unhealthy. But look, that's where they are. So I think what we really need to do is be asking one another, what do you need? And then give people what they say they need. And not, and I think that having a good, healthy dialogue where staff has permission to admit that they need rest. And when did it become such an awful trait? It's like, ooh, Pastor so-and-so didn't even use all their vacation last year. Well, that sounds like a bad pastor to me. But I think that oh, it's so great. Oh, they haven't used any of their time off, and or they're always willing to just cancel their plans for a break if anything happens. We glorify the hardworking. And I even find when we get to talking about Rhythmic Week, we're going to talk about taking time to really plan out your week, to have that balcony time to look at all that's coming up for you in your schedule, and we probably should, as church leaders, have regular time of prayer. That prayer is a part of our preparation. It's part of our rest and it's part of our preparation. But let's face it, when you tell people, oh, I was up at the church for 14 hours yesterday working on this document and that document, then I went over to the hospital and visited so-and-so, and then I was, putting together the handouts for our upcoming, event. People just think that's great. But if you said, man, I spent 4 hours yesterday just in prayer, there are not a lot of church folk who are like, oh man, that's so hardworking. It's like you don't get credit for the things that actually are still work. And then you certainly don't get credit for man, our pastor is just the best at taking breaks. I think our pastor is so great at Sabbath. Yay! Whoever got cheered for being a great Sabbath taker? And I think that we take all that in as church workers, and we're being trained that you get valued by your ability to overwork yourself. And so if you're blessed to have a congregation like I do that says, hey, let's think about a break, then you should really count that blessing. And if you aren't, then we need to find ways to get the language to get the breaks that we desperately need in between all the marathons we're running.
I think that's an opportunity to also like name and own that sometimes the reason why we work so hard is so that we get the credit, which is a thing to be aware of yourself as a leader, and that it's important. This is another ministry architect's idea that from my coach is that we're all interims, and so we're not going to be here forever, and we're not God, and so we probably shouldn't value things that are only true about God, who never sleeps or slumbers. We should value other things about our own ministry, because I was telling you just before that that last week I got too tired, and I got tired enough that I didn't have anything left for my kids when I got home, and then when my spouse got home, I cried. I was just like, I'm so tired. And what the word that I sometimes use for it is working on tilt, which is a gambling term when you're into way too much debt, but you can't stop gambling. It's the sensation of being on tilt. Another word for it is burnout. Like that. But the way it happens, I think, in lots of work, and church work is not immune from it, is I'm burnout and I just still can't stop working. So it's like a functional burnout, and I think that when we start to hear somebody say, oh, they work so hard, they never take their vacation, they're always willing to show up, what that's a warning for is eventual burnout. And especially for church workers, burnout is when really bad things happen, where you leave the ministry, you make a giant mistake. The rest is an investment against burnout and against the things that can bring about. So it's a gift that you can kind of give your future self and your current congregation, and it's a way to remember I am not God. Only God is God, and that's the good news. I get to take a break. God gets to keep working.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dana and Barbara have put some really great comments in the chat feature that I think lead back to this idea of expectations that congregations put on leaders. And kind of what we've been talking about the past few minutes really is about the need for a culture shift, a need for a shift in the language that we use, a shift in the way, even when we go to seek a new call, right? When we go to a new church, is rest and Sabbath a part of what we ask our new possible employers? I want to know, not just I get this many weeks for vacation, but do y'all value rest? Do you value Sabbath? And those aren't questions that we usually ask, but it helps the folks maybe that we're interviewing with, or even our own boards, our own sessions, our own councils, or whatever is your governing body. What would it look like, as we talk about how do you ask for a break? I think it starts at the beginning. It starts when you sit down for that interview, and it's a conversation that goes on throughout your whole tenure in this position. But I think it's something that has to be brought up to change this culture of these high expectations. I've spent 14 hours at the church, and then, like Rob said, and then 6 at the hospital, and then I went to one of the youth group kids soccer games, and then I came home, Rob, and then I crashed at the end of the night. My own kids didn't get. I didn't go to my own kids game because I was somewhere else, and the church goes, yay, good for you. That's such a great pastor. Forget about the pastor's kids. Like, our kids are okay. But if we can just start to change that culture, change that language, you can't change folks' expectations, but you can, we can get ahead of it, I think, when it comes to how the congregation, how our senior leaders see and model really good rest practices and Sabbath practices. I worked for someone who didn't do a very good job at rest or Sabbath, and projected that onto the staff of like, no, if folks in our congregation are working, then we're working. And that didn't set a really good model. What it did for me though, is I said, okay, I can't, watching the senior leader kind of go, I realized I can't do that. If I, when I get into the position where I'm calling the shots, like I want to be able to create a kind of culture where rest and Sabbath and breaks and pauses are a part of who we are. And not just for the leadership, but also for the folks sitting in the pews or the folks sitting in front of a Zoom screen. It's not just for us, but it's for everybody.
I think that getting to the point where we can help one another navigate those conversations, because people are coming from different experiences of life. You kind of touched on this in what you just said, where, they're not feeling like they're getting a break. I imagine there's a lot of people in my congregation that would love to have their employers say, take the month off, but it's not happening for them. So, that's where there's one of those thin layers of guilt that old Pastor Rob carries with getting a month off, is that I know how many people in my congregation are tired and overwhelmed, and they're not getting a month off. Like, they're not getting some sabbatical for several months or anything like that. And I think we need to figure out the language to speak about this need as spiritual leaders, that the work that you do as a church leader is different. And I'm not saying that it's better, that it's harder, but it's different. And it drains your soul in ways that other jobs don't. And again, not harder. There's jobs out there that I could never do. I'm not built for it. I couldn't handle it. If I did it, I would need to take every other day off. Okay. And I can tell you, being a healthcare worker, bam, there's one. If I was a nurse, I would need every other day off. I'm not built for that. So that's why I never went after that. Right. But I think that there's a lot of pastors out there that don't have the board or the session or just the congregation members that are supportive of this, or that understand that the work is different. And I think that that's something that, I'm curious to hear, maybe, Drew or Aqueelah, or, how you've found words to express this particular aspect that of what we need.
I think I've been lucky and blessed in having a church that does want to look after me and invest in me, and including in rest. But I think part of the way, one way to approach the language is to have a culture of accountability in general, where and let the need for rest be something that the church can hold you accountable for. So I had a annual review with one of the members of our team recently, and she's an amazing worker. She did not take all of her vacation last year, and she confessed that she has a really hard time stepping away from work because she feels like there's nobody else that she has to do that, and there's nobody else that can, and it has to be done. And so when we got time to saying, what are your goals for the next year, one of the goals that she named was, I want to take all my vacation this year. And so we actually talked more about, okay, what's that look like? And she said, I think that means I have to schedule my vacation, because I'm not just going to do it. I have to say, this is when I'm doing that. So I think keeping rest as something that's on the to-do list that you want to be held accountable for is part of it. It's almost like saying rest is part of my job. I think I've been lucky, like I said, that I think I have a church that understands the different nature of church work. There's part of it, we're not on call, but we are. There's part of it is the exhaustion of having to do so many different things in one day. I told you I did. I had a staff meeting today, a funeral today. I have a job interview tonight, and a meeting with a grieving family. Those are like very different roles that we get to jump into, and they take the toll, and the transition from one to the next takes the toll. And it's not just pastors that do that. It's our receptionist has to do the same kind of thing. Just because the nature of the work is that, we serve the Alpha and Omega from beginning to end of the day. It's all relevant because God is in the midst of it. So from womb to tomb, there's stuff that the church does and shows up for because God shows up for that. So that's just different from other areas of work. And so it begs the question for rest as something that's part of the package.
One really cool blessing last year was I struggled with asking for help last year, and I was wiped out by, I don't know, by June. I had pretty much hit a pretty hard wall, and our presbytery came into partnership with one of the local camp and retreat centers, and they produced a worship service every month of the summer. And the way that they framed it was, your pastor has worked so hard, give them a Sunday off, let us do worship, the worship's on us. And I saw it and I was like, okay, so how do I get this? Like, did anybody else in my church see it? It feels kind of awkward to go, hey, did y'all see this break opportunity? Anybody? And luckily, yeah, one of our elders saw it and brought it to session and said, you know what? How about this Sunday? And then you get to choose another Sunday. So that really taught me a great lesson. And it's I think it has to be even beyond our congregations. Like how do we make rest and Sabbath and breaks just a language of every day, so that it's not just about the pastor, because then it was like whoever else was helping along also got a break during that time. But it was such a great moment, one of the best moments of last year, just getting the email that the presbytery was like thinking about it, and somebody recognized that last year had been really difficult. At this point, there are pastors who are video producers and Zoom masters, and not just preachers and hospital visits, but we have to figure out how now to do funerals in the midst of COVID with all the regulations. So there are all these pieces, and I think this is the perfect time to have conversations with your congregation and with your governing boards. That right now, 2021, what month is this? April, right? To have those conversations of like, these are all the things that not only I've done during the pandemic, but even pre-pandemic, and I'm tired. I need a break to actually say those words. This might be the safest time to say those things because they could understand, all of the upside down that has happened. I shared with the group a little while ago, there was a pastor, fantastic pastor of a pretty large church in Virginia, but maybe about a year and a half ago, who preached a sermon titled Selah, I think. And he talked about this just deep need for Sabbath for himself. And he said, I've never felt so disconnected before. And he said, you know what, y'all, I want to be in this for the long haul. And if you want me to, I want to be the best pastor and preacher that I can be, but I'm tired. I mean, he just put it out there. He just said it from the pulpit. I'm tired and I need a break. And he was going to take a month sabbatical. And I worried about the response from that. Like, would people come back and go, what do you mean you need a break? Like, you preach on Sundays, like you're great at it, you do whatever. But the response from people was really amazing. Like, yeah, pastor, you do need a break. So I think just having the leader, youth leader, pastor, whoever you are, to say it. Sometimes folks need you to say it. They need you to say, I'm tired, I need a break. How can we, work this into the rhythm? Because they might just assume like, you got this, you're so talented, you got this, you're so good at what you do. And they assume maybe that you are taking that break. So it might be also just a matter of, finding some safe folks to say that you need a break and that you need some rest.
I used very similar language when we talked about applying for a sabbatical grant. And I was aware that there was one congregation member who said, it almost sounds like a threat. Like, if you don't give me a break, I might quit. And I just kept saying, that I want to do this for the long haul. And that's why I think, sabbatical is a good thing. And then I just would name it. I'd say, and I'm not saying that as a threat. it might sound like I just started to name it. So I was grateful that that congregation member pointed that out to me. It sounds like you're saying you're going to quit if we don't give you a break, And so allowing that congregation member to kind of speak over that to me got me to try to clarify that for them. But I think it's great. Here's the thing. You're absolutely right. 2021 right now is a great time to talk about this because maybe more people can relate to it. But I'd like to think that we don't need a global pandemic to justify Sabbath. You know what I mean? Like this is something that we was applied to before this. But I have news for you. A global pandemic didn't make it easier, right? I mean, if it was there before, global pandemic didn't like bring down the stress levels for anyone. I think the two factors that I've talked with other pastors about this, the two factors that make what we do a little different that are helpful to point out to people is one, we have to be well behaved all the time to everybody. And I'm not just talking about for the 10 minutes that customer is in the line and you have to deal with them and they're rude to you as you're taking their order maybe in a job like that. I mean, for their life, we got to be nice to them and put up with whatever unhealthiness is going on. We have to try to always walk that higher road of grace and understanding and, well, you've had a bad day. And, how many times can a pastor just fly off the handle at somebody? You got to keep that emotional labor going until they die, and actually even a little after they die, right? And then and you don't just have to keep that emotional labor so you keep this front, but there's one more thing that we're asked to do that we gladly do as pastors. You have to love all of them. I tell when I do coaching or pastors, I was like, you need to love them and they need to know you love them. That's your main job. That everything else will be fine, honestly, if you do love them and they know you love them. So you've got the emotional labor that's in a lot of other professions. And on top of that, we're expected to love our congregation. I don't know that many professions where it is expected that you will love everybody that you work for and with. That's different kind of pressure.
Annette, are you going to talk to us now? We could probably just keep going forever, but
yeah, so good. No, so good. And I think the language that you've given is really helpful. I wanted to give a couple of practical tools, and then Drew, Brent Parker had asked for you to say a little bit more about God being in all of it. And so I'm going to give the practical tools so that we have those before people have to break, and then we'll go into some of the questions and anything else that you guys want to add. But we had mentioned Rhythmic Week earlier, and Sean will put a link to that Rhythmic Week in the chat box. But just basically what that is planning out your week. And every time I coach someone on Rhythmic Week, I get the same feedback. But Annette, every week is different. So I can't plan out every week to be this Rhythmic Week. What you'll do is if you go look at the resource, you've got each day divided up into 3 sections: morning, afternoon, and evening. You want to block off your Sabbath time. 3 of those blocks are set. And so you start with that. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but you can read the instructions in there and you can see how it works. But here's the thing you need to know is you want to look at it as if each one of those little blocks is a Post-it note, a little sticky note, so that you can go move them all around. Okay, maybe I can't do my Sabbath on Thursday this week. It's got to be on Monday. So you want to have all the same sticky notes, but you may be able to move them around. So I don't want you to look at it and say, oh, I could never do this. I want you to look at it and say, what's my ideal week, which you may never have, right? But you'll have all the pieces. So when you go look at that, it's just going to a little bit of strategy and discipline to say, here's when I'm going to Sabbath. And if you have an office in a church and you put it on your wall, you're communicating that to people who come in your office. Oh, Thursday's my Sabbath, or Saturday, or whatever. You're communicating that. The other thing that you might want to look into is finding a coach to help. Drew mentioned he's had the same coach for 10 years. We're all better with someone from the outside who can help give us language, hold us accountable, if you're interested in something like that, 6 sessions is going to be, usually we take those over 6 months. It's about less than $800. So think about that. If you're like, I really want to do this, but I know that I'm going to need some accountability, and I know that I'm going to need someone to help me work through some difficult conversations. So if those are things you're interested in, you can email us, and Sean will put our emails in the chat box, or you can go to the Ministry Architects website and do the contact button and put your question in there, and someone will get back to you about those things. So I just want to make sure you don't miss those, but I would like to bump back to Drew and let you talk a little bit about how God's in all of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to do that in a roundabout way, and that tries to share up some practical stuff too. The question that Rob asked was along the lines of how do you do this and how do you work with the language and the culture. I think everybody in a church, whether you're on the call or on the webinar and you're a pastor, a minister, an administrator, or a volunteer, everybody's kind of has a sphere of influence. And I think that wherever you are, you can advocate for the rest and Sabbath of those that you serve directly. And that can be a way of changing the culture. So if you're a youth minister, you can advocate for the rest of your youth. You can also advocate for the rest of your volunteers and say, you know what, you haven't missed a Sunday this year, which is great for your consistency, but probably not great for the long run of your sustainable ability to do this ministry. So let me know when you're going to take some time off. I happen to be at a church with a relatively large team, and what we decided to do was to tell our staff to take a break, and to give them the break in 3 main ways. One is we closed the office for the week of Easter, after Easter. So we had church volunteers check the voicemails and check the mail, so that even the administrative staff could take the week off and really get a break. And we had people come back from that and say it's the most rested they've felt in a long time. And like they laughed with their family. That's how tired they were, that they hadn't been laughing with their family. So that's one way that we offer it. Another is we said you get 3 days of vacation in addition to whatever's in your job description to use between Easter and Pentecost. And that includes that bit of accountability. And last week I said, please send your supervisor which 3 days you're taking so that we can continue to hold you accountable and actually get you that rest. And then the third is we said, anybody who's on staff that works on a Sunday morning, take a Sunday off between Easter and Pentecost and let us know which one that's going to be. The effort there is to give people rest in a way that actually hits them, the kind of rest that they need. The last thing that we said is if these don't hit you, if this doesn't get you the rest that you need, make a proposal to us of what you need, and the answer will be yes. Because the idea is not that we want you to rest in the way that we've thought of. The idea is we want you to rest. And so offering that kind of rest to whoever is in your sphere of influence can be a way that potentially then comes around to you, because then somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, okay, so when are you going to take your break? Which is exactly what happened. We were offering that, and then the staff said, so Drew, you're going to send us your dates too, right? And so I have to tell them now, they're going to hold me accountable in the same way I'm holding them accountable. And the part about God is that it's an act of faith to do this. And it's a way of telling the people in your sphere of influence, if you take a break, God will still be working. That's the whole idea of the biblical idea of Sabbath, is that it's connected to the Exodus. Yeah, you are not slaves. This world is mine. And so all that has to get done will get done. That's God's promise. It's not on your shoulder. Even you are called to love everybody. You won't. The good news is that someone else can love everyone. Someone else can not slumber or sleep. You can't. You have to. So it's ultimately an act of faith, saying, I'm going to take a break because I believe in a God that doesn't, and a God that cares for me and my flesh. The last practical thing, this is really practical. If you use Gmail, get to know the snooze button, because you can snooze an email so that it comes back to you when you want to read it. And that is a way to get yourself a little rest and get to like 0 on the inbox, even though you know that there's still stuff. You don't have to keep track of it. Say, I don't want to think about this again until Thursday. You snooze it till Thursday. That's one little tiny rest thing I wanted to make sure to include too.
I love that. Super practical. And I think those are some great thoughts for us to kind of land this plane on. So I want to thank all of our panelists for your wisdom and your compassion. And if you find yourself stuck and don't know how to get that rest, check out some of our resources. One of them that I hadn't mentioned yet is we've got a blog on our website, and it is so well written and has so many good tips by Abby Buter. It's about ministering out of the overflow of what we have. So take a look at that as well. Look at the rhythmic week. And then if you'd like somebody to help bounce some ideas off around and how to talk to people, then check that out. Check out some coaching as well. So thank you so much.